of the source.
Yeah. So I'll go back.
Wait, do you want them in order or do you want them just randomly?
Just randomly, whatever you.
Okay, so, but you're gonna give me the answers?
Sorry.
Well, I can tell you, I was gonna say God line, but you just showed it up there. Okay.
Got one.
Is it biblical? What
Got
else?
aligned. That's what.
Yeah.
God
Bias.
aligned. Oh, God aligned. Okay.
Consider the bias.
Yeah, is there a bias? Let's think.
Your own blenders.
Yeah, blind, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Future,
Do they have
Yeah,
experience?
yeah,
Credentials.
gain, short, long term, that kind of thing.
Yeah, long term.
Oh,
short
you're
term.
good. You have a great memory, Walter.
No, I have a terrible memory. I just have a good 30-second memory and it flashed it up. The short term's clearing right now.
Does anybody from our televised audience remember any of the other characteristics that we're looking for? Boston's, Cody's,
Bonda's eating, so you won't talk to you for a while.
Fonda's. Okay, I'll just go back. So it's got a line. Will it help?
Help
Will
a
it harm? I think Walter got long short-term gain. The Thor advice sword
Mhm.
He said that.
was what Leah said. You're looking for the hidden bias of what they're.
Yeah, we
trying
said
to
about
accomplish.
buying.
Right.
Motive, that's what I forgot.
Motive, credentials, trust and ethics, and blinders.
Yeah. Trusted ethics, yeah.
So when we read this, let's sort of see if we can weigh these things in the balance, because I know Leah's got a PhD in analysis.
I'm just.
I associate.
Not that as a senior systems and engineer, I don't do analysis.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All
I
right,
have a reader for.
So hopefully we're on the same team.
all right, we're gonna start with Roger. You're the first reader, please.
Okay. All right. Zadok was also there, and all the Levites with him were carrying the ark of the covenant of God. They set the ark of God down. Abiathar offered sacrifices until the people had finished marching past. Then the king instructed Zadok, return the ark of God to the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and allow me to see both it and its dwelling place. However, if he should say, I do not delight in you, then here I am. He can do with me whatever he pleases him.
So this is after the horrible comeback story of Absalom, who left after killing Amnon. He was away for 3 years. He lived with his grandparents, the king and queen of Gerar. Then he basically was convinced through a little play by Joab with the woman from Tekoa to put on this grand performance like Shakespeare about two sons. One who killed the other, and the other was the sole survivor. And why has my king done the same thing? And so he's like, who put you up to this? He's like, Joab. So,
We're all like water spilled on the ground that cannot be recovered after all.
yeah, exactly. So then he gets brought back, and the king says he can come home, but he can't see me. So he sits there forever, and he's like, what good is this? If I don't see my dad, what's the point of being home? So then he knocks on Joab's door and tries to get his attention several times. He completely ignores him. So he sets his field on fire.
Yeah, I mean, great
To get
guy.
his attention. And he's like, what the did you just do to my fields? He's like, oh, I want to see my dad. It's like, you're gonna see your dad. So then he tries to set himself up as a judge, and then set himself up as a king. And when all this is going on, part of it is what David knows, that this is the bad things that are going to happen because of David and Bathsheba and the man he murdered.
This just goes to prove that you can't train your children through osmosis.
Yep.
Or intuition.
Man, we're getting all kinds of deep things tonight.
Yeah, you actually have to talk to your children. You have to coach them and
Your
leave them,
children are
right?
so obedient. All the little Leahs, all the little Rogers.
my cats are obedient. My cats are very obedient.
So this is the risk, but basically he's saying, I return the ark of God to the city, and hopefully, I'll be able to come back and see it someday. And the reason why is Abiathar is the guy we're gonna be seeing a lot more of with Ahithophel with his advice. But Abiathar was one of the priests and, they're all witnesses to what's going on. So Leah, you're the next, sorry, go ahead.
In verse 27.
Yes.
Okay. The king also said to Zadok the priest, look, return to the city in peace and your two sons with you, your son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. Remember, I'll wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God to Jerusalem to Jerusalem and stayed there. David was climbing the slope of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he ascended. His head was covered, and he was walking barefoot. Each of the people with him covered their heads and went up, weeping as they ascended. Then someone reported to David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Lord, David pleaded, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness.
So just as a little backstory, Zadok is the priest, he's the one who wrote many of the Psalms. He's telling him, go back to the city and take your two sons, and they're going to basically be spies for him. So it was Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, and Abiathar's son Jonathan, and they're running military reconnaissance for King David through Jerusalem. So they're informing on what's happening with Absalom and Ahithophel and getting that information over to David. Okay. So when he learns about Ahithophel that he had sided after all this time with Absalom, he's upset, shocked, and probably horrified. Why, after all this time, would Ahithophel suddenly switch his loyalty to Absalom?
Because he was the grandfather of Bathsheba.
Dum, dum, dum.
Yep.
Yeah, you know it. And so he may have been plotting as long as Absalom had been plotting for Amnon's blood to be shed, because Amnon raped his sister. So this whole piece of advice, I want you to see the circuitousness of this, okay? So Absalom waited to kill Amnon for raping his sister, right?
Mhm.
Ahithophel is furious with David for taking, basically raping, if you will,
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba. So his advice to Absalom is what?
Vindictive.
To rape the 10 concubines of David.
Right.
So this whole thing is a train wreck, and it's all based on bad advice. Who advised Amnon in the first place? You can back the train all the way up to him.
Jonathan, wasn't it?
No, it was another.
It's
Brother.
Jonadab.
Jonadab. Yeah.
So Jonadab, I believe, is a first cousin to David.
Mm-hmm.
He's one generation back. I
Yeah.
think.
Mhm.
And he is the one who advises Amnon, oh, act like you're sick, tell your father you want, Tamar to come and feed you and take care of you, and then you can do what you want with her. So it started all the way back there. Why do we know that? Because when Absalom does kill Amnon, David gets the report that what actually happened.
And he killed all the king's sons.
Right. And who says, no, not all of them died by the Lord.
Jonadab.
Jonadab. He's like, he was only after Amnon. I was like, well, that would have been a nice piece of information to know for the last 3 years, that he'd been plotting this. So I just want you to get it. Jonadab advises Amnon to rape Tamar. Then Absalom plots for 2 or 3 years to kill Amnon because he raped his sister Tamar. Then from that event, Absalom sets himself up as king, and Ahithophel's been waiting for his revenge on David for taking his granddaughter. And so his advice to Absalom is rape all 10 concubines on the rooftops of Jerusalem. So I just want you to get, I need to make a graph because it's just so crazy, this cascading bad advice.
Mhm.
Linda, you're up.
When David came to the summit where he used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, "If you go away with me, you'll be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and tell Absalom, I will be your servant, my king. Previously, I was your father's servant, but now I will be your servant. Then you can counteract Ahithophel's counsel for me. Won't Zadok and Abiathar the priest be there with you? Report everything you hear from the king's palace to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. Take note, their 2 sons, Zadok's son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan, are there with them. Send me everything you hear through them. So Hushai, David's personal advisor, entered Jerusalem just as Absalom was entering the city.
So David's very smart. He's pitting one senior advisor against another. It's like the cabinet for the White House.
Mhm.
And one's gonna give the president bad advice, and you're secretly planting information in another cabinet minister and telling them, we need you to counsel, we need you to check this guy's bad advice and give him something else. So in this case, what David's really petrified of is what? What does he really think is gonna happen here? What's his biggest fear? He's been told by Nathan the prophet what was going to happen.
Well, I think his biggest fear was that Absalom would be killed.
I think so too. So he has to defeat his advice so that this won't go any further, and he's got to pluck him into the situation. But anyway, and we're validated by that when Joab comes and tells him, if you don't stop this weeping and crying over your dumb son, you're going to lose everybody who ever cared about you. So it's amazing. So he takes these 2 kids, teenagers, I would guess, who are spies, and basically plants them in Jerusalem and tells Hushai, look, whatever information you get, give it through these 2, Jonathan and Ahimaaz, and then I will find out what is actually going on. So it's very strategic, and there's lots of advice going back and forth here, but I want you to see just how bad it gets. Walter, it's up to you.
Now Absalom and all the Israelites came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was also with him. When David's friend Hushai the Archite came to Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. Is this your loyalty to your friend? Absalom asked Hushai. Why didn't you go with your friend? Not at all, Hushai answered Absalom. I'm on the side of the one that the Lord, the people, and all the men in Israel have chosen. I will stay with him.
Okay, stop there for a second. What kind of person is Absalom?
A very vain person.
Yeah, that's the first word that came to my mind was vain. Narcissist.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's so good.
So when you're dealing with a narcissist, what do you have to do? What do psychiatrists tell you?
Pump up their ego.
Do what you want, but don't cross them
No.
because they don't like that very much.
So that is why he starts. He's like, not at all. I am on the side of the one, the Lord, the people, and all the men of Israel have chosen. I'm like, I feel pretty good. The Lord's chosen me, the people have chosen me, blah, blah, blah. So he does the right thing because he knows. I mean, we use these modern terms that he's a narcissist, but he knew he was a very vain person, as you said, Walter. So he is feeding into it all. And that is really going to undercut Abiathar. So go ahead, sorry.
Absalom.
Yeah, well, no, Ahithophel.
Oh, I see.
It's too many A's.
One of those guys with starts on A, right? I will stay with him. Furthermore, whom will I serve if not his son? As I serve in your father's presence, I will also serve in yours. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give me your advice. What should we do? Ahithophel replied to Absalom, sleep with your father's concubines. He left to take care of the palace. When all Israel hears that you have become repulsive to your father, everyone with you will be encouraged. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubine in the sight of all Israel. Now the advice Ahithophel gave in those days was like someone asking about a word from God. Such was regarded that both David and Absalom had for Ahithophel's advice.
Dude, isn't that amazing that they felt like, I mean, the only time we really hear his advice is here. of what Ahithophel had said advice wise, and I'm like, this is so contrary to anything the Lord would say.
Exactly.
You're like, how in the world could they have thought that? But I guess he had good moments.
And
Well,
the
I mean-
people think this is great.
The Lord was working in the background.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he was making them more open to the suggestion of Hushai.
So I just want you to see this cascading waterfall of bad advice, okay? So Jonadab to Amnon, Amnon to Absalom, Absalom to basically usurp himself as king, and then Ahithophel, the grandfather of Bathsheba, advising him to do the same thing. How many times has this happened in the family?
And you have other advice going on too, like with Shimei, you know, what's his face?
Well, he was
Abishai.
bad.
Abishai wanted to say, why should this dead dog curse the king? Let me go over and chop his head off. So that was his advice.
Yep, not like that guy. You gotta
Right.
admire his fault, but it's not what God wanted, and he did get his comeuppance in the end.
But look how out of touch Ahithophel is with the people. Oh, the people are going to love you for doing all this evil and terrible stuff. All them wives are talking to their husband. Don't you get no ideas?
I
Well,
know.
the regular people are saying, this ain't what God taught us. This is not the way we live.
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that this would have hurt Absalom in the view of the people.
Exactly.
And it would hurt David because there's his 10 concubines. So it's a win-win-win for Ahithophel.
It was like the whole thing of let's do evil that good may come, right?
Yeah. There you go.
He knew no good was gonna come of it, but
Oh, yeah.
it was pure evil. So who's our online reader now?
Okay, so let's go with David. Are you available?
I'll give it a try.
Is Nancy ill tonight?
No, she was there a minute ago.
She is here. She's sitting back in a softer chair. She will not be reading tonight.
Okay.
Sorry.
Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Let me choose 1,000 men, and I will set out in pursuit. I will attack
Not a good connection.
while he is weak and weary, throw him into a panic, and all the people with him will scatter. I will strike down only the king tree and bring all the people back to you. When everyone returns except the man you're seeking, all the people will be at peace." This proposal seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel.
Thank you very much, David. I think your mic might not be working too well. You were kind of in and then out and then in and then out, so.
I apologize.
Oh, no, don't apologize. I just don't think, for some reason, it's like, it's very clear and then it's gone.
Technology.
I don't know what's going on. So, Ahithophel's advice, this is later on after he does this, is to immediately attack David, which would have been militarily smart, right? With 12,000 men, and he could attack him because he's weak and weary and throw him into a panic. He's like, I'm only going to kill the king, and then you can be king yourself. And this proposal initially seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. I mean, everybody's standing there. They're all seeing this. So we know that it was actually advice of Hushai that they took, which was to wait and to gather all Israel together and chase him down. So let's look at Ahithophel's advice. Is there somebody up there who can do the analysis? Or wants to do the analysis?
I'll do it.
Okay, go ahead, Leah.
Okay. So was it God aligned? It was not God aligned. It was immoral. Was it for help or harm? It would harm Absalom's relationship with his father, King David, irrevocably, It would harm the 10 concubines and make the people disgusted.
So 10 concubines never got to leave the palace after that. They were just locked away. And
Yep.
they never saw David again either.
Nope.
So y'all can add your own to this if you think of something else that goes along with it. I just put up what a quick jot thought down.
Long-term gains. There were no gains, short-term or long-term. They would only serve to permanently damage his future. The advisor source. Ahithophel was held in high regard, yet his advice was the most poisonous and unbelievable, since Absalom had harbored a grudge with revenge in his heart for his brother Amnon for raping his sister Tamar for 2 years, then kills him. Hidden bias. This is burning bridges permanently, and possibly Ahithophel had something against King David. Advisor motive. To ruin the dynasty permanently for Absalom had, and possibly for King David. Credentials. Ahithophel's credentials were strong, and David compared them to being like asking God for advice. Trusted ethics. Ahithophel's advice would have been true, but not ethical, as we saw his advice concerning Absalom and David's 10 concubines raped on the roof of the palace. Your blinders. Absalom's blinders were great. He may have never forgiven his father for not providing justice in the case of Amnon raping his sister. So now he had the opportunity to destroy the lives of 10 women and insult his father in every way.
Yeah. So it was, I mean, once this was done, you had burned everything from the past. And that's why Joab had no mercy on Absalom after this event. It was just, I mean, he had sided with him, stood up for him, let him play for him, done all this stuff, but now he's permanently damaged the relationship with his father, with Joab, with people, and with the priests.
This kind of reminds me of what it says in James about, that man's anger. How does it say? Something like the man's anger does not satisfy the righteousness of God, or something like that. I'm not a very good quote at all, but
We'll keep looking for it. Can I have another reader, Walter, for the Hushai
Okay.
quote?
Joanne, please.
Second Samuel 17. Then Absalom said, summon Hushai and Archite. Also, let's hear what he has to say as well. So Hushai came to Absalom, and Absalom told him, Ahithophel offered this proposal. Should we carry out his proposal? If not, what do you say? I can't say it.
It's Hushai.
Hushai replied to Absalom, the advice Ahithophel has given this time is not good.
Hushai continues.
Yeah, I just can't say that name. You know your father and his men, they are warriors and they are desperate like a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Your father is an experienced soldier who won't spend the night with the people. He probably already hiding in one of the caves or some other place. If some of our troops fall first, somewhere is sure to hear and say, there's been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom.
Thank you, Joanna. That's perfect. So what's brilliant about this is the same thing that was brilliant about what the serpent said. First, you plant doubt. Then you reinterpret the evidence. And lastly, you give a new future. Those three things make up the perfect deception. And he's purposefully deceiving him so that he will be mute or inert. He won't be able to do anything. So what's brilliant is he starts off with not shaming Ahithophel. He's just like, the advice of Ahithophel is not good, right now for this situation.
so what would have been the right advice from Ahithophel?
Oh no, his advice was perfect. If he had followed it, he would have won. He would have taken.
But how could it be perfect when he was telling him to rape David's
Oh no,
concubines?
I'm sorry.
The attack.
Using 12,000 men to
Oh,
attack his
okay,
father
gotcha.
and to annihilate militarily. It would have been. spot on.
Of course,
Well, look
it's-
at,
yeah.
go ahead.
I'm gonna say it assumes that God would not have intervened and said, no, that you're
Yeah.
not gonna kill the guy who's gonna be the heir to the line. But anyway,
Well, looking at James, I was just kind of trying to see, what's the opposite of what Absalom did, and the advice that he followed. And it says, first it says, consider it nothing but pure joy when you fall into all sorts of trials, as Absalom felt he was in, right?
Yeah.
Because the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect effect so that you will be perfect and complete, not deficient in anything. So instead of letting it have run its course, he decided to basically bail out and kind of upset the ship, if you will. So it says, if anyone is deficient in wisdom, he should ask God, which is what David did.
Yeah.
David said, pray to the Lord, please frustrate the advice of Ahithophel. So
Exactly.
David asked God. He didn't have wisdom about what to do, right?
Yeah.
But he asked God, who gives to all generously and without reprimand, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed around by the wind. And it talks about that person being a double-minded person. But the rich person's pride should be in his humiliation, because he will pass away like a wildflower in the meadow, which is what Absalom did. He was the most glorified person.
In a tree.
Yeah. And he passed away like a wildflower in the meadow. It says, for the sun,
Pile of rocks.
the sun rises with its heat and dries up the meadow. The petal of the flower falls off and its beauty is lost forever. So also the rich person in the midst of his pursuits will wither away. But happy is the one who endures testing, like David was, because when he is proven to be genuine, he will receive the crown of life that God promises to those who love him.
That's good, because I think that's what's happened here.
Yeah.
And he's gotten into Absalom's headspace. Okay.
Mhm.
And the reason why I think that's important is because he's like, your father is like a wild bear robbed of cubs. And he's like, I remember those days when I was a kid. And it's like,
Yeah.
your father's an experienced soldier and he will not spend the night with people. And he's probably already hiding in a cave, so you're not going to find him tonight anyway.
well, see, Hushai's advice actually is very true and
It was
sound.
good. Yeah.
It's just a matter, could you get your 12,000 there fast enough before
Yeah.
he found a good hiding place? That was the
Yeah.
real question.
Yeah.
But waiting, well, now you ain't got a chance of finding David, because he has found some good place to
Yeah. That time was everything, right?
be. So
Yeah, so he was borrowing time, and that's what's really good about Hushai's advice, because they weren't gonna pursue him. But I mean, it wasn't any secret where the king went. You've left a wake of people behind you and
Yeah.
your troops
Right.
Yeah.
5 foot.
Yeah.
And
Barefooted and weeping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
it's
in
not-
James 1:20, it says, for human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness.
Right.
That we should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So, that was also Absalom's fault, is that he let his anger try to accomplish God's righteousness.
mhm.
And it wasn't God's righteousness. It was just his own vindictiveness.
Yeah, and Ahithophel as well.
Yeah.
So we're still in 2 Samuel 17, and who's our next reader?
Fonda, have you done with your salad yet?
Fonda?
Yeah.
Okay, your turn if you want it.
Okay. Then even a brave man with the heart of a lion will melt, because all Israel knows that your father and the valiant men with him are warriors.
Okay, stop there for 1 second. Stop there for 1 second. So he's saying this because of the last verse, verse 9, which basically says, if one of your men, one man gets slaughtered and the people hear about it, it's going to turn the tide of everything. So he puts that bit of fear in Absalom's headspace to say, you don't want this. If one of your guys dies and it gets in the morning paper or on the radio, you're toast, man. You do not want this to happen. So that's why what you just read is so important. This is the heart of a lion will melt, and all Israel will know that your father is a valiant warrior. So he's planting the doubt. Even if one of your men, Absalom, dies, this is going to end badly. So that's why he keeps building on this false headspace that he's put in. Go ahead, sorry.
Instead, I advise that all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand by the sea, be gathered to you, and that you personally go into battle. Then we will attack David wherever we find him, and we will descend on him like dew on the ground. Not even one will be left of all the men with him. If he retreats to some city, all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we will drag its stones to the valley until not even a pebble can be found there. Since the Lord had decreed that Ahithophel's good advice be undermined in order to bring about Absalom's ruin, Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than Ahithophel's advice. Did I say something wrong?
No. It's just a monster saying. He's like, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than Ahithophel's advice. I mean, that would have been like in a super stadium being shouted out by the announcer. I mean, everybody would have been talking about this. They've never seen this happen before. Ahithophel's always been the alpha male. Hushai has been an advisor on the side. But now it's all changed. So I was applauding the way you read it. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
So it's got so much hyperbole in this, so much exaggeration. It's almost mythical. By the end, I'm expecting him to say, and dragons are going to come into the village and eat David. I mean, it's that kind of craziness, like all of Israel from Dan to Beersheba. How do they know they're going to get a consensus of everybody from Dan to Beersheba? You know, is going to personally go into battle, is going to bring ropes and tear down every block of any city that they live in until there's not a pebble. That's a little bit of exaggeration, if you don't mind my saying.
It kind of reminds me of what Jesus said, you know, to the ecclesias in Revelation, when he would tell them, you know, I don't like it that you tolerate this woman Jezebel who causes my servants to commit sexual fornication.
Right.
He would say in essence, but if you don't do something about it, I will, you know. And so we know that Jesus walks among the candlesticks. You know, he walks among his people in the ecclesia, you know. And if something is going wrong, or that it's a bad direction, or maybe it's advice which isn't sound or whatever, you know, we shouldn't feel like our hands are tied, because you know God knows all things, and Jesus, you know, knows all things, and also will he will walk among the ecclesia, and he will make things right that we can't even control sometimes, you know. So I think, you know, I mean, sometimes we do have situations or maybe relationships that are not, you know, as smooth as they could be, and we worry about these things, you know. And of course, it's not just in the ecclesia, but it's in our personal lives as well, right? But you know, Jesus has a way of going in and causing people to think certain things, or moving them this way or moving them that way, you know, for the sake of his servants, you know, for the sake of the right way.
Yep. So with this one, he's done the three things that we've identified, which is he's planted a doubt at the beginning. One of your men gets killed, it's gonna be a scandal, all Israel's gonna abandon him. And then he's like, your father's like a lion who was robbed of her whelps, and he's gonna come after you. And then he reinterprets the evidence as, it's not a good idea to go get him now, he's probably hiding in a cave anyway. Let's wait, which is all that he really needs to do. Let's wait until we got the right moment to attack him. And I promise you, and this is the false future vision, we'll be all in Israel alive. We'll all go to whatever town he's hiding in and pull every stone down, doesn't have help. All exaggeration, fake future. And he's planted the doubt, and he's reinterpreted the evidence. So those are the three big things you come away with. And it works. So let's see. Walter, would you like to do Hushai's advice?
Yeah, I can read that. got aligned. It was aligned with King David. This is Hushai's advice, by the way. Help or harm. It harmed Absalom and helped David. The long-term gains. Short-term, it reduced the threat of Absalom's rebellion. Advisor source. Hushai was a strong friend of the king and was well trusted, which is why at first Absalom is suspicious of his loyalty to him.
So you can comment on any of these. I'm sure you all have other ideas to add to this. This is just the sort of get the conversation started about what you think.
For some reason, a psalm popped in my, or proverb, whichever one it was, as we were thinking about all these things.
Mhm.
I remember it said, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And in the proper use of these things here, he could have had a very different outcome by speaking calmly and collectively, like, hey, let's think this out. But instead, it's like, we're going to go get him. Let's do this. And of course, the wrath comes and everything that God had planned, like, see, you weren't thinking straight. And that's, I think, good for us to think about as we think these things. The soft answer, kindness to someone, brings peace. But when you go after them and start calling them names and doing things, everybody gets upset. And can you argue with someone or have a discussion with someone who's really ticked off at you?
No.
No, you can't get through them. They've already decided and turned you off. So that's what happens here. Ahithophel's advice, you've already said all this bad, terrible stuff, and now you've stirred everybody up. Nobody's going to listen to really what you're doing. So back to the identification of a hidden bias. Hushai's bias was to stall Absalom from attacking his father, and to frustrate the plans of Ahithophel and overrule him. Then we look at the advisor motives. Hushai's motive lay in convincing Absalom not to listen to Ahithophel's advice and to delay a war. And that's what we try to do when we're teaching the truth to everyone. We want to be clear and concise and, like, if you will, create this war that can happen if we have common good sense. The credentials, and this is an important part. Like Ahithophel, Hushai was considered strong counsel to the king and his friend. Trust and ethics. Hushai was a trusted member of the king's wise men, and his ethics were also high. Yet Absalom could not have known he was not to be trusted.
Because he had already seen Ahithophel switch sides.
Yeah.
And now Hushai has switched sides. It's like, okay, everybody loves me.
Right.
Yeah. Nobody has any loyalty to this David. It's all to me. I'm the great king.
I'm young and gorgeous. My dad, the old and wrinkly.
Not a bad thing, probably.
I mean, I'm sure he was very vain.
Okay. And so the blinders. Absalom was so blinded by his own glory, by his tireless ambition to be king, and any path that could get him there was a ticket to his aspirations.
It really was, because he just needed, he didn't know how to get there himself, which is why he burned down Joab's field in the first place. And all these other tricks, he just doesn't know how to take the power or how to get the power. And so that's why I think it was like a stream coming out of a rock that this advice came to him. He's like, oh, yeah, this is the way to become king. These guys are my dad's advisors. They wouldn't lead me astray. But they really did.
And remember, the means does not justify the end by these kind of behaviors. Oh, it's all for the truth. I'm going to have this great thing when we're done. But if you use the serpent's method of doing things, what do you get when you're done? A bunch of deceived people who, when they figure it out, that's the end of that. Could it be? And they're going to turn on you.
I just want people to remember those three things, which is you plant out, you wrongly interpret the evidence, and you give them a fake future.
Well, it's kind of interesting that, all these things to me, like, it's almost like they're all in a cauldron stirring around together, right? And you don't know how the situation is going to turn out, On the one hand, you've got David was given a prophecy that 4 of his children would be taken,
Well, I don't think he knew it was 4. He said the sword will never depart from your house.
Yeah, but he knew
but
God told him he was going to have to restore the lamb, fourfold, just like you said,
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, so fourfold is, basically
Four
four sons, So you have Amnon, well, then you had Tamar, then you had Absalom, and the last one was Ahithophel. That's 4 kids,
It's one because the baby died.
The baby, yes. Yeah, that's right.
And then-
Those 4 sons, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the last one is the one who dies after him. No, it's still while he was, no, can't remember whether he was, I think he was still alive. When Solomon set himself up as king, well, Solomon was put on the throne and his brother.
Adonijah.
Adonijah.
Adonijah. That's what I'm just saying. That's what I meant to say instead of Ahithophel. That's
There's two
Adonijah. I
names.
know, they're all about the same length.
Just go
So-
Canadian, you'll be okay.
You never get into the Lord of the Rings and Gollum and Gimli and all these G's. I'm like,
They just drifted off in the story anyways.
Yeah. So you have this cauldron of things all
Yeah.
happening, right? And David must have been thinking in his mind, like with the baby that died, is God gonna allow this one to live? He didn't allow the baby to live, and then he lost. Here comes Absalom. Is God gonna take Absalom? That must have been kind of in his mind. Is he gonna save Absalom? But all these things are kind of floating around this cauldron. How's it gonna go? But God is the one who determines where it goes. What's that one psalm that says, a man may devise his way, but the Lord directs his steps, right?
Steps, yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing we can do sometimes is pray for wisdom, pray for God to make it turn out the way he wants it to turn out. But we don't know which way it's going to go,
Yeah, and be prepared to accept that answer when he gives it to you. That's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is a cauldron soup of good and bad advice. So this next one, how much more time do we have?
Oh, about 15 minutes or so.
Okay, this one's pretty short, so I'll try to do this one. So this is probably there's so much bad advice that's heeded in the Bible, like the serpent's influence over Eve and Adam. This one and Ahithophel's advice and so many others, where it affects the long-term disaster is forever. It never stops.
Mhm.
And this one is one of those signature moments that's probably the best example of all the ones I can come up with about taking bad advice. What's interesting is that Rehoboam had just enough wisdom to ask the right group before making a decision. The problem was he didn't weigh the advice, which is what we're trying to do. Because I was like, when I look at this, it's like, how do you measure advice? That's how I came to this whole thing. I was like, what criteria do you use to see? And that help or harm one came from my doctor, because I was telling her about it when I saw her. She's like, you need to add help and harm. I'm like, you're absolutely right. This one's really important because it's probably the quintessential example of being given good and bad advice, not weighing it, and then it was sealed in granite that the house of Israel was divided until Christ comes back. It was not united again. So let's get a reader for 1 Kings 12.
I think we're back to Roger now, aren't we?
Okay. The kingdom divided. Then Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. When Jeroboam son of Nebat heard about it, for he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon's presence, Jeroboam stayed in Egypt. They summoned him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam. Your father made our yoke difficult. You therefore lighten your father's harsh service, and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you.
So they've come, all of Israel, this is the point I want you to get, has come to Shechem to make Rehoboam king. Are they divided? Are they united?
United.
They are a united people.
Mhm.
Did Solomon leave his son in good shape?
No, he didn't.
I'll make this point. He gave him everything. The only other kingdom, only other reign on earth to be called the kingdom of God was Solomon's reign.
Mhm.
He gave him a united kingdom from the Euphrates River to the Nile.
But God did tell Solomon that he would divide the kingdom.
He did. I'm just saying he left them on good ground. But this decision tore it all apart. God prophesied this was going to happen. But I'm just saying, no king in Israel left their son in better situation. King Hezekiah, left Manasseh in a good situation. Manasseh left his son in the worst situation humanly possible. So anyway, I'm just saying this was all united before this came, and their one request is what? Is it difficult?
Make things better for us.
Let's make it a little bit lighter.
Yeah, back off.
They're not
Take
asking
off
for
the burden.
new hospitals, new schools, a monorail, new airplanes, whatever. New space shuttle to go to the moon.
2 chickens in every pot. I get it. Yeah.
They didn't ask for any of that. They just said, lighten our load a little, buddy. That's it.
What's
Yeah.
interesting is the role that the Lord was playing in it, in this as well, which is in verse 15.
But we're not there yet.
Okay.
They're probably grown.
Okay, I won't say it.
Steal the- All right, so who gets the next one?
That wasn't me.
5 through 7 only.
5 through
Not
7.
15.
Okay. Rehoboam replied, "Go home for 3 days and then return to me." So the people left. Then King Rehoboam consulted with the elders who had served his father Solomon when he was alive, asking, "How do you advise me to respond to these people?" They replied, "Today, if you will be a servant to these people and serve them, and if you will respond to them by speaking kind words to them, they will be your servants forever."
So basically, they're telling him, be a servant leader,
Yeah.
which we've all read the book. We know what that means. And he said, be diplomatic. Say the right thing. Even dictators do that much.
Yeah.
They say the right thing to the people, even though they're gonna do something different. You're really dumb if you're a terrorist and you're speaking bad words. So the other thing I want us to see here is, whose advice did he seek first?
The young men. Oh, the older men.
Yeah.
Right, so that much was smart. Yeah. We can give him kudos for that much. And this is the fulcrum point where it all sits. So why was this advice not satisfying to him? What was he looking for? If he's looking for yes men, what did he want them to say yes to?
Well, at this point, he doesn't really have an opinion for him. He just needs to know, what should I do in all this mess?
Okay, I guess we'll wait till we see the other
But
piece of the
that's
advice.
what brings it in.
It makes you wonder, what did he really want from these people?
That's what I'm saying, is that when your father's King Solomon,
Yeah,
how are you gonna top that?
yeah.
So you need to break away from your father's shadow
Hmm.
to establish who? Yourself.
Yeah.
And so he's looking to, as every reign and monarch does, they're looking to make their mark on society and to make their mark on the world. So he's telling them, you should be their servant. You should say nice words to them. That's not making your mark. So let's just see what they say. Next reader is Linda.
1 Kings 12:8. But he rejected the advice of the elders who had advised him and consulted with the young men who had grown up with him and served him. He asked them, "What message do you advise that we send back to these people who said to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" Then the young men who had grown up with him told him, "This is what you should say to these people who said to you, 'Your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us.' This is what you should tell them. 'My little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Although my father burdened you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with barbed whips."
And another version that says scorpions.
Yeah.
So I want you to look at verse 8. So he heard their advice and he rejected it. They weren't telling him what he wanted to hear, right? Can we establish that?
Hmm.
So what did he want? My guess is that he wanted to make his own mark. He wanted to stand apart from his father. And what's said here is brutal, cruel, and almost sadistic. Because he knows what his father had done during his administration. They built the palace. for the king and queen. They built the temple in that time. They hauled logs all the way down from another country by sea and brought it up over the mountains. I mean, it was not easy labor at all.
But then again, did Solomon really listen to his own advisors? Because they're speaking wisdom to this young man, Rehoboam. But yet, I think probably these same advisors would have had a problem with Solomon when he started building all these high places to his wives' gods and all these things. They probably had a couple of things to say to him, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Did Solomon listen to them?
Yeah.
So maybe Rehoboam kind of got this rebellious spirit, from his father in some ways.
Yeah, so I just think that this is a pretty unbelievable answer, and I think there's a hidden message in here too, which I don't even want to bring out, but it's very empty. It's not a pretty message. So next reader is Walter.
Okay. I will mention that advice. It has a strong echo back to the days of Genesis, to the time of Pharaoh, when Pharaoh said, go find your own straw, your own bricks. I'm making things worse on you instead of better.
That's right.
And the people, if they got any history in their head, like, hey, this all sounds real familiar to me.
Mhm.
Thanks for me.
Yeah.
Well, keep in mind with Pharaoh, I think it's like 7 times that Pharaoh hardened his heart.
Yep.
It said Pharaoh hardened his heart, and there's about another 9 times that it said God hardened his heart. And that might be what's happening here.
Yeah.
God is hardening his heart
Mhm.
for the sake of the prophecy.
Mhm.
Because of what Solomon did in chapter 11 of First Kings.
Or the person's character is such that God had already seen. I don't got to do much with you. You're going to just go do it yourself. But let's see what he says here. So starting in verse 12. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had ordered. Return to me on the 3rd day. Then the king answered the people harshly. He rejected the advice the elders had given him and spoke to them according to the young men's advice. My father made you yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whip, but I will discipline you with barbed whips. The king did not listen to the people because his turn of events came from the Lord to carry out his word, which the Lord had spoken through Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Oh, yeah. When all Israel saw that the king had not listened to them, the people answered him, what portion do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Israel, return to your tents. David, now look after your own house.
Yeah, God did harden his heart.
There it is, right there.
I hadn't picked that line up before.
Yeah, I paused there so you could see that because he came along.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, thank you for reading that, because it's excruciating for us. It sort of breaks my heart because of all that had been established. Because I think it's Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, who knows who will inherit all this? Will he be a wise man?
Mhm. Mhm.
A little bit.
He got his answer. And this divided the house of Israel for the rest of the time. I want you to think about which group of people this affected the most in all of Israel. Who did this impact the most?
The Israelites who had to succumb to Jeroboam's idolatry.
I mean,
They couldn't even go back to Judah.
One more group was more preciously hard hit.
the Levites were,
The Levites.
they were terrible. I
They
mean,
had to give up all the towns they were living in and all the other tribes and move to Judah.
Mhm.
They weren't gonna get fed. They
Yeah.
weren't gonna get the first fruits. They weren't gonna get anything.
Yeah.
So they had to abandon their towns of refuge, all that, and move to Judah only.
But really, Solomon was the one who set all this in order, because God had told him more than once, if you are faithful to me, I will establish your dynasty.
But it says his downfall was his wives.
Yeah. So Solomon, he's the one who planned this out for his family. What all would happen to his family?
Yeah.
By not being faithful.
Didn't last long.
when you hear someone say to you, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, how do you always finish that statement?
Because
When you cause
Israel
Israel
to
to
sin. I mean, even if it weren't written here, it's
Yeah.
in your mind.
Yeah.
And that's the legacy that this has brought about to you.
But I think the Lord has always done this, no matter who. He's always testing. He tested in the wilderness. Who's really going to serve me? 2 people out of 1.5 million made it into the promised land,
Mhm.
Caleb and Joshua. You know, he's always saying who's really, really going to serve me, and he's always sifting mankind to
Mhm.
see who's going to be true and who's chaffed in the wind. And he's
Yeah.
doing it right now with,
Yeah.
with what we've just been through with the pandemic. He's sifting hearts. He's saying who's really mine.
Mhm.
But God shows you here, one person's name is primarily associated with Israel's sin. He says, Jeroboam, it was your fault that my people went this way.
Mhm.
You caused Israel to sin.
Mhm.
I mean, they all had to go and do the sin, but it was you who started this path.
Yeah, he said.
That's important to remember. One person on the wrong
Yeah,
path can
Rehoboam
do.
didn't do that.
Yeah.
What Jeroboam did.
Yeah.
He prevented them from going to the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only thing I want you to read in number 9 is adore them. They didn't adore him.
What?
Adore him. They didn't adore him. The easy rhyme to remember this.
I know
He
what
was
you're
he was the headmaster over all of them. He was the slave driver
Mhm.
as a Durham.
And you're running out of time.
I know. So let's just read this slide and we'll call it a night. Who's next?
Okay,
Slim didn't.
it's Linda's already done it. I just read, right? Did I
Joe,
just
can
read?
you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I've got a speaker in front of me.
That's good. I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, actually, it's your turn if you want to read, so it's
If
perfect
you want to
timing.
read that, that'd be great.
Okay. So Israel went to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the Israelites living in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Adram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam managed to get into the chariot and flee to Jerusalem. Israel is rebellion against the house of David until today. Rehoboam is the first. When all Israel heard that Jeroboam had come back, they summoned him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. No one followed the house of David except the tribe of Judah alone.
So that was a 90, more than 90% drop off. You take 12 tribes and you take off 11. That's almost all of it. And so that means that Rehoboam wouldn't be getting so many vats of oil, so many vats of wine, 1,500 cows a day, and all these barrels of wheat. He'd get whatever Judah could provide, and that would be it. So we'll stop there for tonight, and we'll do the analysis next time. Because it's really important for us to see how this affected Israel. So, David, actually, I'll get Walter to close.
Just remind you that probably next Thursday we'll be at the funeral arrangement,
Okay.
so we probably won't be here.
So we're gonna cancel class for next week because Walter and Linda have a funeral to go to attend. So we'll pick up in 2 weeks if that's okay with everybody. Unless you just want to drive here, we can do it here.
There you go.
So thank you all so much for being here. I'll get Walter to close.
Sure. Our dear, kind, and merciful Heavenly Father, we approach that throne of truth and mercy and grace in the name of thy Son, realizing we are but the dust of the earth, from where we came, and to it we shall return. But we have this hope through thy word thou hast provided to us, that there might be life, an abundant life. We put our faith and hope in you, that day we long for when thy Son shall return and establish thy kingdom here upon the face of the earth, greater than the kingdom of David, greater than the kingdom of Solomon, where peace shall reign, true peace, once he has established thy word across the world. And we know that will be soon because we feel it in our hearts and know that you are with us. We thank thee for the guidance and directions you put in our lives, for these classes that you give us where we might consider thy word, see how it applies to us. We pray that you might be with those who suffer through trials and tribulations and afflictions of the heart and mind, that you might touch them and heal them as it brings about thy purposes, that we might not forget that indeed we do suffer through things, to remind us of the weakness of the flesh, that our hearts may turn be away from the flesh, but to you, We thank thee for these things and pray for the soon coming of thy Son. Enter the name of thy Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you, Brother Joe, for class.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for everything. Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
Y'all have a good night.
Good night, y'all.
No, I never thought about it until we had this class.
Hope you feel better, Brother David.
Thank you.
We all say good night, Nancy.
We see you back
Night.
there.